All right, so our next type of tasks that we're going to take a look at is code generation tasks. Now, it's well known among programmers, but perhaps less so among non-technical people, that ChatGPT is actually quite good at writing code. So if you want to write a script using ChatGPT or use it to help you make changes to some sort of software that you're developing, in many cases it can do a very good job at writing effective code. Now, of course, there are some interesting things that you have to keep in mind when doing so, and that's what we're going to go through in this video. So the first thing to keep in mind when using ChatGPT to generate code is that you need to be specific about the programming language. So if you're writing a Python script, you're going to want to be very clear that you want ChatGPT to write a Python script. You're going to need to use the word Python in there more often than not. And that's pretty self-explanatory. So the next thing is that if there are any specific libraries or approaches that you want to use, you should be specific about those as well, right? Especially if you're doing something like building a website. There are so many options out there for front-end libraries, back-end libraries, different programming languages you can use. And if you have a preference, you need to be very specific about that, or in general, ChatGPT will just kind of make that choice on its own. So if you want to create a front-end site, right? If you want to create a front-end site, let's say using React, you're going to want to say, help me build a front-end site using React. And if you want to write that front-end site in React using TypeScript, you're going to have to list out all of those things. Or again, ChatGPT is just going to sort of make assumptions around what libraries and technologies you want to use. And the same thing goes for approaches. If you want to use more of an object-oriented approach versus a more procedural approach versus a more functional programming approach, you're going to want to specify that as part of your prompt. And if you're not a programmer, don't worry too much about all this terminology. Just know that you really need to be very specific about what technologies you want to work with. And if you have any questions about this, the good news here too is that you can always ask ChatGPT to run you through the basics of a programming language or a series of them and explain the different benefits and drawbacks of each one. So if you don't know if you want to use, let's say, React or Angular or Vue or vanilla JavaScript to create a website, you can have ChatGPT make you a chart or something like that, comparing the pros and cons of each one and even showing you the basics of how each of them works. So that's just something I wanted to mention there as a possibility. And in many cases, especially if you're a programmer, you'll have some sort of existing code base that this code will have to fit into. So that's something that you're going to need to provide by either copying and pasting your code or creating a custom GPT, which again we'll talk about in more detail later on, that has a knowledge of your code base, right? This can be very helpful because it will give, in many cases, it'll give ChatGPT all of the major context that it needs in order to give you code that not only works, but is written in the same way that the rest of your code base is written. So just to give you some examples of what we might want to use code generation tasks for, web development is an obvious one. In addition to being able to come up with the logic for different websites, it can also help you develop things like basic styling. So it can write CSS to add colors and different styles to your website, as well as coming up with the actual interface in general. So if you have a fairly complex or repetitive interface, you can have ChatGPT help you generate that. If you want to generate, let's say, an interface for that allows users to edit their profiles, you can have ChatGPT generate the basic HTML or a basic React component, something like that, that will at least give you a good start for that part of the interface. Writing simple scripts. So if there's something that you want to automate, right? If you want to perhaps do basic web scraping where you collect data automatically from a website, that's something that ChatGPT can help you out with. If you want to create a script that maybe reorganizes your files on your computer automatically. You can do something like that too. If you want to maybe write a script that helps you upload files to some cloud provider, that's also another possibility. Really, the sky is the limit here, and any program or script that you might want to write, ChatGPT can generally do a pretty good job with. And another interesting thing here is that ChatGPT is pretty good at analyzing your code and finding potential problems. So if you have a piece of code that's not working correctly or is giving you unexpected results, in general, if you copy and paste that code into ChatGPT and ask it, why am I getting this output from this code, it can do a pretty good job of helping you figure out why you're getting an unexpected result. Or if you're afraid that some of your, let's say some of your server code might have some security vulnerabilities in it, ChatGPT will help you identify those if any exist, right? So if your website is vulnerable to cross-site scripting or some sort of SQL injection, ChatGPT can usually do a pretty decent job at helping you identify those problems and fix them. And this is also true, as I mentioned before, if you have ChatGPT generate some code for you and then analyze the code that it wrote, in many cases it will actually be able to iteratively improve the code that it's writing just by you asking it to improve it iteratively, right? So if you say, okay, what's wrong with this code, or how could we write that piece of code in a better or more concise or readable way, ChatGPT is usually pretty good at doing that. All right, so just to give you an idea of how this can work, what I'm actually going to do is just jump right into a ChatGPT conversation, and I'm going to just ask it, using all of those things that we discussed so far, I'm going to have it generate a simple script that will do something like, maybe it'll write a script that scrapes data from a website, all right? All right, so if we go to a site like Hacker News, I use this example quite a bit because it's kind of a fun site to scrape data from. Let's say that we want to scrape the headings and number of upvotes from the Hacker News news feed. So let's just let's try and go over to ChatGPT and see if it can do that. What we're going to do is we'll say something like, write me a simple Python script. All right, notice that we're using Python. We're being very specific about what programming language we're using. And actually, we don't even need the word simple in there. We can say, write me a Python script that will scrape the headings and number of upvotes from Hacker News. Well, here, we'll just say from the Hacker News website, and write those to a file, or to a CSV file, perhaps. All right, so again, we're being very specific here. There's probably other details that we could add to this, but in general, we're being pretty specific about what we want to do, and really the only other thing that we might want to do here is actually inspect the structure of this code and provide that as part of our prompt. This may or may not be totally necessary, but if you take a look at the page, you could actually copy this whole thing here. If you need to, you could even provide some of this data as well. We'll see what it gives us here, but let's hit enter and see what code it gives us, and you're going to see that generates a Python script for us, and that it's actually, as you can see, I mentioned this earlier, Python will generally, ChatGPT rather, will generally just kind of choose some libraries that it wants to use, right? So it'll, you can see here that it's using the beautiful soup library, which is just a popular web scraping library for Python, as well as the CSV library and the requests library. And I'll leave it up to you to kind of run this script if you're interested in doing so, or if you know how to do so, but in general, to me, it looks pretty good, and you can see that it says story, link, and score, and if you need to make changes to those, you could always just copy and paste some of the HTML structure from that page into here, and that would help point ChatGPT in the right direction with that script. But anyway, that is how to get ChatGPT to help you generate code for different tasks. So the next thing that we're going to take a look at here is how to use ChatGPT for basic language translation tasks.